John Rambo sat by the riverbank, the jungle around him alive with sounds of nature. The fading sunlight filtered through the trees, casting golden reflections on the water. This was a life he had sought, peaceful, isolated, and far from the chaos of the world he once knew. His calloused hands worked the knife over a fish, preparing dinner with practiced precision. The quiet, the routine, it kept his mind settled. He thought he'd finally left the violence behind. The distant thrum of a helicopter shattered the stillness. Rambo's eyes flicked up to the sky, narrowing. Few people ventured this deep into the wilderness without reason. He felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the instinctual awareness of an approaching threat. The helicopter's roar grew louder, disturbing the tranquility as it descended toward his cabin. Rambo stood, his eyes scanning the tree line, already calculating escape routes and contingencies. The chopper touched down, kicking up a storm of dust and leaves. As the blade slowed, 3 men in dark suits stepped out. The lead man was tall, square-jawed, and exuded a government agency aura that Rambo had seen too many times before. He carried himself like someone used to giving orders, but his eyes betrayed something else, fear. That was enough to tell Rambo that this visit wasn't a courtesy call. "John Rambo?" the man called, walking toward him with a firm step. Rambo didn't respond, just wiped his knife on his pants and stared. "I'm Agent Cooper with a Special Operations Division," the man continued, stopping a few paces away. "We need your help. It's urgent." Rambo's silence hung heavy in the air. He had long grown tired of these requests. His days of missions, bloodshed, and saving others were supposed to be behind him. He had no desire to be pulled back into the fray. Cooper pressed on unfazed. "We have a situation, something you're uniquely qualified to handle. A few days ago, a crash occurred deep in the Amazon rainforest. We sent in a special forces team to investigate, but we lost contact with them. Whatever's down there, it's killing everything it comes across. Wildlife, villagers, civilians. Our intel says it's not human." The word "not human" lingered in the air like a storm cloud. Rambo's expression remained unreadable, but the gears in his mind turned. He had faced the worst of humanity, but this was different. Cooper continued, sensing he was beginning to get through. "We believe it's an extraterrestrial species. Highly advanced, highly dangerous. The creatures are apex predators, masters of stealth. They can cloak themselves, mimic sounds, voices, even human ones. They've started hunting, and the jungle is turning into a slaughterhouse. We need someone who knows how to operate in that environment, someone who can handle this level of threat." Rambo's gaze shifted toward the dense jungle beyond his cabin. The Amazon, a place where the line between predator and prey blurred every day. He had been in jungles before, fought wars in them, survived against impossible odds. But what Cooper was describing was something far worse, something beyond human comprehension. "They want you because you know the jungle," Cooper said, stepping closer. "We're running out of time. If these things spread beyond the crash zone, it could be a global catastrophe. The team we sent in, they were the best, but they underestimated the enemy. You won't." Rambo could feel the weight of the words, the responsibility pressing down on him. His instincts told him to refuse, to stay hidden in his refuge. But another part of him, the warrior who had fought through countless battlefields, stirred. If innocent lives were at stake, if this threat was as lethal as Cooper claimed, he couldn't turn his back. "How many?" Rambo finally asked, his voice rough from disuse. "Unknown," Cooper admitted, relieved that Rambo had spoken. "We believe there are at least a dozen, maybe more. Their ship crashed, but they've scattered. They're hunting." Rambo turned his back to Cooper and walked toward his cabin. He could feel the eyes of the agents on him, waiting, hopeful. Inside, he opened a weathered chest, his old gear still meticulously stored. He ran his hands over the weapons, the knives, the survival tools. He had hoped he'd never need them again. As he strapped his knife to his belt, Cooper spoke from the doorway. "You're the only one who can do this." Rambo didn't answer. He loaded his gear, testing the weight on his shoulders, and headed for the helicopter. The piece he had found in the jungle had been fragile, a thin veneer over the warrior still inside him. That part of him, the part trained to survive at all costs, was awake now. The flight to the Amazon base was quiet. The agents didn't speak, and Rambo had no questions. He sat still, watching the landscape beneath him transform from mountains to dense, endless jungle. When they landed, night had already fallen. The air was thick with humidity and the sounds of life. Animals, insects, all alive for now. The base was small, temporary. Military tents were set up around the perimeter, the soldiers tense and on edge. Rambo stepped off the helicopter, his boots sinking into the soft ground. As he surveyed the camp, a colonel approached, saluting him briefly. "They're out there, somewhere," the colonel said, gesturing to the dark expanse of jungle. "We haven't dared send anyone in since the team disappeared." Rambo said nothing, but his eyes were already scanning the tree-line, listening for the unnatural silence that would signal something was wrong. The jungle was alive, but for how long? With his gear secured and a final nod to the colonel, Rambo entered the jungle alone, swallowed by the shadows. The hunt had begun. The jungle was a living entity, dense and pulsating with hidden life. Every step Rambo took felt deliberate, measured. He had become part of the environment, unseen, unheard, yet fully aware of the world around him. The humid air clung to his skin as his boots sank into the damp earth. Every shadow, every rustling leaf, carried the potential for danger. Rambo crouched low, his eyes scanning the terrain. He had trekked for hours since leaving the base, moving deeper into the uncharted territory where the Scifi were last sighted. The remnants of the Special Forces team, torn uniforms, broken gear, were scattered like haunting reminders of what lay ahead. He had seen death in all its forms, but there was something particularly disturbing about this scene. It wasn't war, it was slaughter. Rambo moved forward, his senses heightened. The jungle wasn't right, it was too quiet. The usual cacophony of insects and distant animal calls had been replaced by an eerie stillness. It meant only one thing: predators were near. And these weren't ordinary predators. The Scifi could cloak themselves, blending seamlessly into their surroundings. They hunted with a cunning intelligence, using the terrain to their advantage, much like Rambo himself. But he wasn't about to be outmatched. He found a vantage point on a rocky outcrop and surveyed the area. His sharp eyes caught something unusual, a faint shimmer, almost invisible to the naked eye, moving between the trees. It was subtle, like heat rising from asphalt, but unmistakable. The Scifi were close, perhaps watching him already. Rambo's heart pounded, but he remained calm. He had fought against the best hunters the world could throw at him, and he'd survived. These aliens were just another enemy. Rambo carefully laid his traps. They were primitive but effective. Pitfalls lined with sharpened bamboo spikes, snares hidden beneath fallen branches, and tripwires connected to explosives rigged from scavenged parts of the destroyed Special Forces gear. He worked silently, the jungle concealing his movements, his traps blending with the natural foliage. Each step, each action, was calculated. He knew he was outnumbered, but numbers didn't matter when the jungle was your ally. Hours passed. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the oppressive heat gave way to the coolness of the night. The darkness would make the Scifi bolder, but it also favored Rambo. He had lived most of his life in the shadows, waiting, striking when least expected. Suddenly, a sound cut through the silence, a voice. Faint at first, but unmistakable. It was a man's voice, calling for help. Rambo froze, his instincts immediately on edge. He knew that no one else was in this part of the jungle. The Special Forces team had been wiped out. The voice grew louder, desperate. It was close, but wrong. The Scifi could mimic human voices, a terrifying form of psychological warfare. Rambo remained still, every muscle tense, knowing the aliens were trying to lure him into a trap. From the corner of his eye, he saw movement, a shimmering figure barely visible. Then another. The Zyrith were closing in, but Rambo didn't flinch. He had expected this. One of the creatures stepped into one of his traps, triggering a snare that hoisted it violently into the air. It screeched, the mimicry fading into a guttural, alien roar. The trap had been set, and now the real battle began. In an instant, the jungle erupted into chaos. The Zyrith moved swiftly, darting through the trees, but Rambo was faster. He had already relocated, positioning himself in the thick of the foliage, his knife gleaming in the moonlight. One of the aliens darted toward him, its claws extended. Rambo dodged, slipping behind the creature with the fluidity of a shadow. In a flash, his knife found its target, plunging deep into the creature's neck. It collapsed with a gurgling hiss. More were coming. Rambo could hear them, 3, maybe 4, circling him, their footsteps barely audible. The alien he had downed shimmered as its cloaking device malfunctioned, revealing a grotesque, reptilian form with elongated limbs and a maw full of serrated teeth. Rambo's mind raced, but his body was calm, instinctively ready for the next attack. He moved quickly through the jungle, leading the remaining Zyrith toward the next trap. A tripwire, cleverly hidden among the underbrush, detonated a series of explosives, sending debris and shrapnel flying. 2 of the aliens were caught in the blast, their cloaks flickering as their mangled bodies crashed into the ground. Only one remained now. Rambo could feel it, stalking him, perhaps enraged by the loss of its pack. He slowed his breathing, blending with the jungle once more. The final alien made its move, lunging from behind, but Rambo was ready. He rolled to the side, avoiding its claws, and with a swift motion, unsheathed a second blade. In one fluid movement, he embedded the knife into the creature's chest, driving it deep until the alien let out a final, agonizing shriek. The jungle fell silent again. Breathing heavily, Rambo wiped the blood from his blade and stood over the fallen alien. He knew this wasn't over. This had just been the scouts. Somewhere out there, the real danger awaited. These were hunters, but they weren't the leaders. The one controlling the pack, the one orchestrating the slaughter, was still out there, and it was watching him. As he gathered his gear and prepared to move deeper into the jungle, Rambo's mind sharpened with resolve. He had turned the jungle into his battleground. Now, he would have to face the Zyrith leader head-on. The dense jungle began to thin as Rambo pushed deeper into the heart of the Amazon, his movements now even more cautious. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of nocturnal creatures. His instincts told him the leader of the Zyrith was near. This predator was smarter, deadlier, and had likely been watching him the entire time. Ahead, the forest gave way to an ominous clearing, revealing the alien craft, half buried in the earth and shrouded in vines and foliage. Its metallic surface gleamed under the pale moonlight, creating an otherworldly aura. Rambo's eyes narrowed. This was where it would end. The air was thick with tension as Rambo approached the ship, his grip tightening on his knife and rifle. Every nerve in his body was alert. The Zyrith leader wasn't just hunting him. It was waiting. The craft's entrance was open, and a faint, pulsing glow emanated from within. He stepped forward, moving silently but purposefully, like a predator closing in on its prey. Inside, the ship's interior was a maze of dark corridors and alien technology. The walls seemed to hum with an unnatural energy, casting strange shadows that twisted and danced in the dim light. Rambo's every footstep echoed, betraying the otherwise perfect silence. He kept his senses sharp, feeling the cold, calculating presence of the Zyrith leader close by. This was no ordinary hunter. This was a strategist, an apex predator at the top of its evolutionary chain. Suddenly, the ship's dim light flickered and Rambo felt it. A shift in the air, a movement too fast to see with the naked eye. The Zyrith leader had revealed itself. Towering over Rambo, the creature was massive, easily 8 feet tall, with a lean, muscular frame covered in armored, chitinous plating. Its eyes gleamed with intelligence, and its cloaking device flickered off, revealing a grotesque visage of power and menace. This alien was different from the others, stronger, faster, and more cunning. It held a serrated, glowing weapon in one clawed hand and extended its other, signaling a challenge. Rambo's heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was calm. He had faced monsters before, both human and inhuman. This alien might be more advanced, but it didn't know the depths of human resilience. Rambo circled the creature slowly, his muscles tense and ready, his eyes calculating every movement. The final battle had begun. The Xyrath leader struck first, its weapon slicing through the air with a speed and precision that would have ended a lesser man. But Rambo was ready. He ducked, rolling to the side and firing his rifle in a rapid burst. The bullets pinged off the alien's armor, barely scratching its surface. It was like shooting at a tank. The leader let out a low, guttural growl, its eyes narrowing in amusement. This wouldn't be a battle of brute strength. It would be a battle of wits. Rambo knew he had to use his environment, just like in the jungle. He spotted an exposed power conduit sparking near the wall and formulated a plan. Dodging another attack, he lured the Xyrath toward the conduit, firing intermittently to keep its attention on him. The alien closed in, faster than he anticipated, its claws grazing his arm. Pain shot through Rambo's body, but he gritted his teeth and pressed forward. Just a few more steps. With perfect timing, Rambo dove out of the way, allowing the Xyrath to swing its weapon at him. The glowing blade sliced into the exposed conduit, sending a violent surge of electricity coursing through the ship. Sparks erupted and the Xyrath staggered, its cloaking device flickering wildly as its body convulsed from the electric shock. Rambo didn't waste a second. He lunged at the creature, plunging his knife into a vulnerable spot beneath its armored plating. The Xyrath roared in pain, thrashing violently as it tried to dislodge the blade, but Rambo held firm, driving the knife deeper. Blood thick and black poured from the wound. The alien leader was strong, but its movement slowed as the damage took its toll. Rambo, bloody but relentless, didn't let up. He grabbed the Xyrath's weapon from the floor, feeling its strange, alien weight in his hands. With one final burst of energy, he swung the blade with all his might, severing the creature's head in a clean, powerful strike. The Xyrath leader's body collapsed to the ground, its lifeless form twitching as its systems powered down. The ship went silent, its hum of energy fading as the alien threat was finally neutralized. Rambo stood over the fallen creature, breathing heavily, his body battered but victorious. He looked around the ship's interior, now eerily quiet. The jungle had been reclaimed, and the threat had been eliminated. But Rambo knew the world outside would never be the same. The government agency would probably cover it up, hide the truth about what had really happened in the Amazon. But Rambo wasn't concerned with politics. His job was done, and he had survived once again. He walked out of the alien craft and back into the jungle, disappearing into the shadows as silently as he had come. The wilderness embraced him once more, leaving no trace of the battle that had just taken place. Rambo was a survivor, a warrior, no matter the enemy, no matter the odds.